Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. We're going to get right to the show after these messages. It's such a treat to interview top-selling authors here on Mysterious Goings On. What's even better is when they come back. Burt Weissbourd is a novelist, screenwriter, and producer of feature films. He graduated cum laude from Yale University with honors in psychology. After he graduated, he wrote, directed, and produced educational films for Gilbert Altschul Productions. He began a finance program at the Northwestern University Graduate School of Business, but left to start his own film production company in Los Angeles. He managed that company from 1977 until 1986, producing films including Ghost Story, starring Fred Astaire, Melvin Douglas, John Houseman, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., and Patricia Neal, and Raggedy Man, starring Sissy Spacek and Sam Shepard. He's the author of 4 novels, with his 5th novel, Danger in Plain Sight, that released in September 2020. The Corey Logan trilogy just released in October 2020. Now, he originally appeared here on Mysterious Goings On July 2nd of this year to talk about Danger in Plain Sight, and I invite you to click the link in the show notes to listen to this interview. If you haven't yet, you've got to. It's a treat. Today, let's reconnect with this master of the character-driven thriller to discuss his Corey Logan trilogy and also ask him for his advice for aspiring writers, as well as his takes on creativity amidst the pandemic. Burt Weissbourd, welcome back to Mysterious Goings On.
It's a pleasure to be back, and it's great to talk to you again.
Well, when I said it was a treat, I sincerely meant that. It's interesting, in our last interview, you mentioned how you met the great Ross McDonald, and you were very young, about 26, and you were going to work with him, and he invited you to lunch, and I'm sure you were a little nervous, and he just put you at ease. And I got to say, you know what? You've put this person at ease with our interview so far. I really, really have enjoyed speaking with you last time, and I'm so looking forward to today.
Well, that's great, and that's all true about Ross McDonald.
Well, we'll get into him a little bit more today. I wanted to get with you on a few things today, but first things first, I wanted to let everybody know, especially if you're listening in real time, so to speak. We're recording this the first week of December. Plenty of time for holiday shopping out there, folks. And if you've got a thriller lover on your list, Burt Weissbourd should be one of the top places you check first. We've got a trilogy. It's the Corey Logan thriller trilogy of Inside Passage, Teaser, and Minos. And these are substantial, fast-moving, wonderful, character-driven thrillers that will delight all of you. And I highly recommend it. So we're going to talk a little about that. Burt, we had you on the show in July, as I mentioned, for Danger in Plain Sight, which has done extremely well. I heard that maybe it was what they call, what's that word, bestseller?
No, it's an Amazon bestseller, on a day that we gave them a discount. But it's a great thing to have happen. A lot of people download it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, a bestseller, there's the New York Times and then there's Amazon. Most people, I think definitely though, are looking to Amazon, and I think it's great that you're a top seller. I was very excited. I should say top seller. That's a little better, a little more accurate, but it's still really great. So that book has done really well, and I'm glad. And let me ask you though, that book was really good in a lot of ways, but one of the things that was exciting about it and interesting was that it was a female protagonist, and Corey Logan is also the female protagonist in this trilogy, correct?
Correct.
Is there a theme here I'm missing, or is there something here? Are you consistently going that direction, do you think?
Yeah, I actually wrote an article not since I talked to you about that subject, about writing strong women. And what I feel like, and this was not like a conscious decision, this is not like my goal was to, but I got interested in women who were functioning below their capacities, strong, able women who are shut down in some ways, who are not realizing their potential. And Callie is certainly one of those in Danger in Plain Sight, but Corey even more so. The first book in the trilogy, Inside Passage, she's coming out of prison. And all she wants is get her son back, and she just wants to check out and not really deal with all the things that have been gone so wrong for her. And in order to get her son back, she has to have what's called an adjudication. It's an evaluation by a therapist. And the person he goes to doesn't believe when she says she was framed. It just goes very badly. And in any event, very soon, I'm probably telling you more than I should be telling, but to make this point, very soon she's in real danger. She goes to him for help. He doesn't have time to see her. She runs away in her boat up the inside passage. He goes after her. He finds her. He does take a different point of view. He realized he's made a mistake. He couldn't be more different than her. And it becomes a love story between them. And a lot of what I'm interested in is that how becoming more self-aware, which is what he is able to do with her, enables her to realize her capacities. I mean, it's a very interesting trajectory as, you know, she chooses a partner that she never could have chosen at the beginning of the book. And that really changes her.
Yeah, because they're two sides of a coin. She is the tough, self-reliant, but not terribly self-aware. And I assume Abe, the other character, is the flip side of that, right? He's
Absolutely.
Probably not the guy you would call to go rough it in the wild.
No, he's scared to be on her boat. I mean, he can't swim. I mean, he doesn't have a driver's license because the judge took him away because he kept sideswiping parked cars because, you know, he gets so preoccupied. And, you know, whereas Corey never really spent a lot of time introspectively, you know, thinking about things as a way of solving problems, Abe lives in his mind. He is a master of sorting out psychological issues, and he helps her to understand how that could be helpful.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's all just an inside passage, which is the first of the three. And it's kind of tricky to talk about the book plots too much because, as you say, you know, you don't want to go too deep. You don't want to give too much away. But it's evident, of course, that they both must survive the first book and continue their adventures. Are the stories integral, or are they in? You know what I'm saying? Do you need to read the entire trilogy to get? I mean, you do to get the full flavor of all the characters, but do you need it to kind of get the whole thematic arc, or are they individual books you could start anywhere?
They're individual books, but they're better to be read in sequence. In the second book, they're married, and that makes a big difference in their relationship. And in every book, they're able to become a more powerful team. And that's part of the fun, is how they become more and more able and take unimaginable risks by the third book to do things that they never could have done separately at the beginning.
You know, it's interesting, when I was looking through the books, the first book seems very much, I got a strong, just reading blurbs, okay? Let's just go there. Like if I'm just a reader picking the book off the shelf, there seemed to be quite an adventure thriller vibe going on there. Even a little touch of politics, because you got an antagonist who's a political candidate, correct? And then you get into teaser, and you're basically, it's on the streets of Seattle with runaways and kids. Kind of forgotten kids and those kinds of things going on. And then you get into Minos. Oh my gosh, I picked that one up, and it talks about a character, you know, using I'm sorry, I'll make sure I get this right, using a ceremonial dagger of some sort to carve something into the floor and do this. And I thought for a second, wait a minute, did Burt slip like a fantasy book into this thing or what?
No. The third book is, well, really Abe's book more than Corey's, but both of them are very involved. And the woman you're talking about is Sarah, who has a terrible secret that she doesn't even know she's not aware of. And she's created this Greek mythology to explain it. And nobody believes her. Nobody will listen to her except Abe. And Abe actually enters that world. And it's a very psychological book. And through that, she's able to help solve the mystery of the people who Corey is working with who are dying. And so this is a pretty tough book, but I think it's very moving.
You have a really nice write-up from the Seattle Times, and a quote from there: "The world's best mystery writers, Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, create a sense of place where their characters live and breathe and stab people." Weisbourd's Corey Logan trilogy is in that tradition, living through stories that would give any of us the chills. We're talking about the Northwest in Seattle, correct?
Correct, all of them.
So it's like we discussed last time. Seattle is actually a character in these stories.
No, that's right. In fact, if I could digress for a moment.
Please.
I'm doing a series of interviews. I mean, they wanted to interview me, the person at the Seattle Times who wrote the quote that you just read, as a Seattle writer. And as we talked about it, it became more and more clear that we were very interested in seeing if we could talk to people to talk to us about how Seattle is changing by COVID, by all the other things that are going on politically, by all the things that have happened in Seattle, which has been a very, chaotic time in Seattle. And all the restaurants are closed. So we're talking to Dave Miller, who's the chairman of the architecture department. We're interviewing Nancy Guppy, who is a prominent TV host, and she was on for 15 years on Almost Live, which is the Seattle version of Saturday Night Live. And then we're interviewing Scott Carlsberg, who's the famous restaurateur who did Lamprey and Pisado, the great Seattle restaurant. And we're asking them all to talk about how Seattle is changing and how it will never be the same as it was. And then Brendan and I are talking about afterward what we learned and how it affects the next book and so on and so forth. And I'm hoping that it's a real chance to figure out what the long-term impact of this pandemic is going to be on lots of big cities, because it's huge. I mean, all the restaurants in Seattle have disappeared. That's just the tip of the iceberg, as I'm sure you know.
Kansas City, where I'm based, we maybe are not recognized beyond our barbecue, but we have some fantastic restaurants. Stuff that I would just tell you in my travels would rival just about any large city in the world. And we have lost a significant number of them that just simply are not coming back. At least that's what they're telling us.
I think that's not uncommon. And I also think that if you start talking about, I don't know, just the number of people who are going to be working at home, this whole thing that they've learned to work remotely, and the number of doctors who are going to be seeing patients virtually. I mean, there's just no end to the changes. And of course, the changes in real estate, which are just beginning to be felt, where the prices are going to go way down in some areas and way up in others. And all of that is unknown territory. So we're going to try and articulate some of it.
I would not want to be in commercial real estate right now. That's for sure.
That's for sure.
The other thing too, I work from home too. And I worked remotely, but I still, before the pandemic, I would still meet with people and go out. And I was lamenting the other day, looking at my closet, I just wear the same 3 or 4 shirts these days. It just doesn't, they're clean, don't get me wrong, but it's like I have this whole business wardrobe, not suits necessarily, but you know what I'm talking about. Stuff to look nice, to meet with clients and vendors and stuff. I mean, I'll wear a press shirt when I'm on a Zoom call, but so I think about clothiers. I think about people. I mean, it's so funny. It's not funny. It's sad. In April, Bert, I got a call from a young woman who is a personal shopper for business people. And I remember telling her, I got a bad feeling about this for you. You might want to look into something else. And she just kind of, Go ahead.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I wear clothes that I used to wear for fishing. I mean, sweatpants and t-shirts, and I have a whole bunch of suits that I used to wear for business and for meetings, and I just don't wear them anymore.
Yeah, not to belabor that end of it, but it's funny that it's just the things that you go to, and you talk about restaurants and you talk about clothing, but I think the thing that's fraying a lot too, since we're down this alley for a bit, Bert, it's also fraying, I think, is that excuse me, I think it's very easy to slide into a casualness that can creep into your work life and even your relationships with people who you're kind of, I think if you're smart, you've got a bubble and you keep with that bubble, but the people within that bubble soon start to look almost, maybe not like 3 days like guests, but 3 months in, they start to stink a little like fish too, I think. So I think there's a lot of things that are changing, and I just wanted to bring those things up that are, I guess maybe those are the things on my mind. Because, and one reason I'm glad you brought up Seattle too is because we had this chat last time and we talked about Danger in Plain Sight and how you are such a delightfully eloquent writer of food, and you write these brilliant scenes and with real restaurants in Seattle. But I remember we had a discussion where I told you you remind me quite a bit of Jim Harrison, the late Jim Harrison, who wrote incredible stuff about food. And you and I think you and I might have bonded over that very moment. I think when we both realized we were both Jim Harrison fans.
That's true.
But let me ask you though, so have some of the casualties of the restaurant scene, are they featured in Danger, or any of those restaurants that appeared?
Oh, the restaurants in Inside Passage. There are a lot of restaurants, and I've actually written about the restaurants in Inside Passage. Most of them are gone. The guy that we're interviewing, he actually reviewed Inside Passage early on. And, his restaurants featured in the book, and his restaurant's closed. All the restaurants are closed. There's like 6 or 7 of them. There's only one that's open, and it's in a hotel. It's Shuckers in the Fairmont Hotel.
Yeah, and I've been following with interest the various efforts to try to get some relief to restaurateurs, and it's not been terribly, I don't think, obviously not terribly helpful to this point. But that's a whole other discussion about interventions and stuff like that. But I'm glad we could get into that, because I know that with Corey Logan, I think we're going to be right up there again. We're going to be immersed in this world, in this area, the Seattle area. And so I am pleased to say then, though, sad that those restaurants are gone, but you're still continuing your thread of discussing restaurants and food a little bit in this trilogy.
Absolutely. And I do think that in the next book, I will be dealing with the new restaurants that will show up, that will be very different, that will not look the same, that, you're not going to have tables close together. You're not going to have the same kind of setup. And a lot of it will be takeout, but I think that will play a role in the next book.
And that's exciting. Now, is that next book a completely different
yeah.
character? Okay. Oh, all right. So I imagine you're not going to tell me much about that right now, though.
Well, no, but I think it'll be Callie and Cash. I think it'll be a sequel to Danger in Plain Sight.
Excellent. Excellent. I love that. Yeah. It's funny. I am not in my own work integrated a lot of current events into my stuff, but I think you and I were talking offline before we started today, and it's just, how do you not include a once in a century pandemic in your work if you're writing right now, unless you're writing just pure fantasy or escapism? Is that how you see it?
I think you have to. I mean, I think you have to at least think about it, because everybody is affected by it one way or another.
Right. Well, if you don't mind, let's and we'll circle back to the trilogy towards the end of our chat. I just want to ask you a few questions here that might be helpful. What's your take on aspiring writers right now? There's there's two camps I keep seeing right now. And I remember at the beginning of this where it's like, look, we're going to be locked down. We're going to have a lot of time, you know. Now I've been writing for forever but I have found it difficult to write. But a lot of aspiring writers I've heard from friends or people on Twitter, people on social media, whatever, they're saying things like, finally, my opportunity, I'm going to write that first novel. And I think some have succeeded. I don't know if anybody sold anything, but the point is they wrote the book. But then there's others like myself who've been around a little bit. I found it extraordinarily difficult to focus. Any thoughts on that, on both of those schools of thought?
Well, I'm in an odd situation because I am in the middle of trying to finish a new book, but I've had to put it aside because I'm publishing all of these books. I'm publishing 5 books over, you know, Danger in Plain Sight came out September 8th, the Corey Logan Trilogy, October 20th, and I have yet another book in Velvet, which is a Yellowstone Park setting that will come out in February because we will do so much selling in Yellowstone, which was closed this last year. So it'll be open, we hope, by the summer. And so, and this is all new to me, this self-publishing. I've always had a publisher, and I really tried to do it on my own. And it's totally time-consuming. I mean, it takes so much more time than I ever expected. So I'm not able to spend the time that I would like to spend on writing. So my experience is missing having more time to write during this time. But at the same time, feeling like, my gosh, I never could have done the work that I'm doing on this publishing. And it includes all kinds of advertising and Facebook stuff and social media. And I mean, we're doing all kinds. I was struck early on, you talked about these books making good Christmas gifts. We're setting up our Christmas gift shop so that people can come to the website and choose and we're combining wine, a book, and chocolate. And we've got different kinds of levels of each one. And we will, you know, people buy the book and pay the price, you know, so the first one is like $15. And we will then put the package together and mail it out to the person they want to send it to with whatever note they want to send. Now, that's not the same as writing, but it's a fascinating thing to learn about, to sell your books and to really reach out to people and find things that they're, you know, interested in. And one of the things I think during the pandemic is, you know, you probably have more time to reach out and contact people about things. They will think about new ideas. I mean, the people are on the internet all the time, so that one of the things we've done, and I'm probably going way off the reservation here, but one of the things we've done is we've allied with influencers. And I don't know how much you know about these people, but they're people who, you know, these are book influencers who all have 5,000 to 20,000 followers. And we've aligned with them to sell our books and to, you know, put things on their followers, for their followers, which could include articles, which could include interviews, which could include this interview. And these people are, they're all available. They're all listening. They're all, you know, thinking about what you're talking about. And that's a kind of different setup because, you know, in the past, as a writer, you'd go into bookstores and you'd read your book. And, you know, this is completely different. It's a completely different process. And I'm just finding my way, but I'm finding that this would not have happened in the way that it's happened without the pandemic. Is this really speaking to your question?
It absolutely is, because you've managed to, if your energies couldn't be devoted directly to writing, you've got them directly devoted though to your work and trying to move the ball forward on your work, which is interesting. I'm just anecdotally, the same thing with me is I've had a very difficult time writing, but I have gone back and started trying to push out the series prior to the latest one I'm stalled on, because you still want those to sell and you want to get new readers. So I've been doing that. And just like you, I've been working on, like, I bought some ads on Amazon. I'm reaching out to some people to do some reviews. Of course, I've even considered, I'm a PR guy by day, right? But I have thought about hiring a specific book publicity firm because they just have the contacts that I don't, because I'm not a book publicity person, but there's so many things you can be doing. So you're setting up this holiday store, right? As you said. Now, is that good to go now, or when are you going to launch that?
It'll be good to go on Monday.
On Monday.
So that, it may be Tuesday. I mean, we're just creating right now the format for it. So let's just say next week. Next week.
If you think about it, when that's live, would you have one of your people just shoot me an email, and I'll make sure I'll put that link into the show notes about this episode. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay, yeah. So moving along here, so that is helpful. But just maybe one quick thing though, do you have any advice for aspiring writers who are got this time on their hands? Do you want to tell them, get your butt in the seat and just start cranking? What's your advice if they really think they want to do something?
I mean, I think that, whenever I'm asked this question, I always say the same thing, which is you just got to write. You got to keep writing. You write and you write some more. And, something happens over time where you begin to know when you got it, where you want it. And sometimes you have to rewrite 10 times one sequence. Sometimes it's 20, sometimes you throw it out because you can't get it right. But when you get to the point where you're knowing that you're doing what you want, and the thing that I tell to people is it's what you want that counts. You shouldn't be writing to some, commercial idea of what sells, or some, external kind of image of what people want. You really have to write to what works for you, and that's an individual voice, and it's something that you have to find. And when you've got that and you can do it, you're ready to go out, and sooner or later you'll find someone that gets it. And then, it took me a long time to get my first book published. And then when the first book published, they couldn't understand how I could write so fast, when in fact I've been writing for a long time.
Nice. Well, that's great. Yeah, that's the thing. You just got to write, and you've just said in a different way. It took you years to be an overnight success. That old say, right? And it's funny. I talk to young people who want to write, and I just say the same thing basically. But I always add a caveat, and I say, and don't get discouraged. And sometimes. Yeah, I mean, because it's easy to get discouraged. I know people, it's interesting, particularly with how easy it is to bring a book to market. I mean, now, I don't think it's easy to bring a quality book to market necessarily if you're self-publishing. I believe you should professionally edit it, professional covers, all that stuff. But there's a lot of people who just kind of bang something out and put it up there, and then wonder why something that's got a bad cover, rife with mistakes and typos and doesn't make sense. And they're wondering why nobody wants to read it, or they get a bad one-star review or something from people. And I just tell people, don't get in such a rush because it's so easy to push a few buttons and get it out there. If you're self-publishing, make sure it's really the best you can do, and make sure that story is really where you want it to be before you hit publish. To me, that's, and it's always the advice that kind of gets from some people kind of a frowny face, like, oh, that's so boring. But it's like, no, this is a craft, without getting too fancy about it, because I'm as big a hack as anybody, but it's a craft, and you should be proud of your work. That's where I go with it.
I completely agree with you. And I do think that it's a lot of time up front that's frustrating and, discouraging. And of course, I mean, what you said about people being discouraged, everybody gets discouraged. You don't get the response you want. You don't get the, but if you get to the point where you're writing what you want to be writing about, all you need is one person to get it and want to promote it. And, suddenly you're on your way, and then it takes a life of its own, and you got to keep on going for it until you get there.
It totally does. Well, I appreciate that, and then that's evident in your body of work you've done here. And just reaching back to your prior career, just quickly, where we talked about this in the last interview, folks. So really, if you want to go more in depth on these bits and pieces that I'm kind of touching on with Bert, please go listen to the first interview from July. You're going to love it. But when you worked in Hollywood, when you were a producer, you were very much a screenwriter's friend. We talk about that in the other interview. Won't go too in depth there, but it strikes me though that making a movie is not something you can do overnight either. I don't remember how long production. I wasn't in the movies, but I mean, production on a movie goes anywhere from 2 or 3 years sometimes or more to get a movie from sold to made and distributed. Isn't that right?
Oh, it can be longer than that. I mean, the actual filming, Ghost Story was a big budget movie at the time, and it was months, but it was the biggest time was getting it made and the post-production and the distribution, so that the whole thing is yours. And this goes back to what you said earlier about making sure your book is what you want it to be. I mean, one of the reasons, and I may have mentioned this in the last interview, that I started writing was because I really, as a producer, couldn't control the ultimate product of the movie. And the movies were fine. I mean, I'm not feeling like they didn't turn out well. They just were not necessarily what they would have been if I had the final say about everything, which of course you don't if you're a producer. And so I started writing, and this really goes to your point, which is you don't want to, you can make lots of mistakes, but you don't want to have something out there that's not your best writing. It's not what you want to be writing, because those are the mistakes that you can't undo. It's like, I just read an article about Francis Ford Coppola going back and remaking the third version of The Godfather. Well, good for him, I mean, but how many people can do that, I don't think I can go back and make the changes in the book that I've written and published, after it's out.
A lot of times too, even that first book, you get it out there, and sometimes you only get one swing at your first at bat, your first pitch. And if you put it out there and you start showing it to everybody, and it's not your best work, or it doesn't look professional, a lot of people are going to, maybe not to your face, but mentally write you off, and not going to look at anything else you do. So really, that's my big advice, and I think you and I are in agreement here, is just really, really make sure you've got it, a good edit, good cover. Get some beta readers who will help you make sure you don't have a glaring error. Was it Raymond Chandler what was the book? And he left out a character who was murdered, and he didn't even solve it. And they put it out. I'm trying to remember which movie or book that was, but they said, well, what about the butler? And he goes, oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's always mistakes. There's always stuff that you miss. But I think your advice is very right. And you just put out the best you can. And
yeah.
Then you'll always be proud of it. I mean, that's the one thing about a book, which is that even if you don't get the buyers that you hope to get, if you get the response from the readers who read it and understand it and love it, it's very satisfying.
Books, do you ever enter your books into competition for awards?
I am doing it through the first time. We're going up for awards for all the books. And nice. I've been in someone has really pushed me to do that, who is a promoter, a PR person. And they really feel like it helps. And so I'm willing to try.
I've got to say, even some of the most obscure mentions I've ever gotten for my stuff, it's something you can hang your hat on, and it helps move the ball forward a little bit. So I think it's a good idea too. But again, make sure, as with Bert, it's your best work. It's your best work. Hey, I have to mention this really quickly. When you produced Ghost Story, you were working with, did you have much interaction with the actors who were the golden age of Hollywood people, this cast? Did you ever have any interaction with them much? Or
I did. I had a lot of actors. I'm going to tell you a funny story. Fred Astaire called me one night and wanted me to come up to his room. It was late, and I came up to his room in the hotel, and this was in upstate New York, and he was dancing around the room. He says, I'm freezing cold. He said, you got to get Burt marriages. I got to go home. It's too cold. And I loved Fred Astaire. He was a wonderful guy. And, we had a great conversation. It was very funny. And by the end of the conversation, he was still with us, and so it was well spent. But that is the kind of stuff you do when you're a movie producer.
It sounds like you were doing more tap dancing than he was.
I think so. But we on the more serious side, we had dinners with all of them, and it was amazing because it was like from another time. They're all very articulate, and they tell stories, and they're very gracious, and it was really a pleasure. You just sort of sit back with your mouth open and listen, and these were great stories.
I, believe it or not, had dinner with Patricia Neal.
Oh.
It was probably about eight or 10 years before she passed on. Of course, she famously had a stroke, and I worked for the Heart and Stroke Association, and she came to a fundraiser, and we picked her up in a limousine at the airport. It was me and a couple other people, and we were in there. We got her in there, and she was just lovely. And then she just focused right on my face and started asking me all kinds of questions about who I was, where do I come from, what do I do? And I got to be honest with you, I felt at first a little startled, and then I felt very warm because she was trying to connect with me and ask me all these questions and just get to know who I was. And I was kind of just really enjoying this. And I mean, it was for a good 5 or 6 minutes she was just asking me about me. And then after that, she moved to the next person in the car, and then the next person, and did the same thing for all of us. And I mean, I don't know how she was on set, no idea. But in that experience, and then at dinner, she could not have been more gracious to everyone. Just an elegant grande dame.
She's perfect. I mean, I think perfect. She's exactly the way you described. I mean, I had that same, not identical experience, but she was a pleasure to be with. I had a young son that was born soon after we were making Ghost Story. And she came, my wife brought my son up. And I'll never forget Patricia Neal and John Houseman and Fred Astaire. They were all sort of passing him around like he was like, a little baby, and it was so memorable. I still think about it. It was great. That evening that I was introducing my young son to these great old actors, and he was being passed around and played lovingly by, elderly stars. We took him back to our room. We discovered he had chickenpox, and to our horror, we found that, we knew that caused shingles, and that's really very bad for people who are on film and so on and so forth. So we were panicking. I had to spend hours and hours with every expert on these diseases and so on and so forth to make sure that our guys were not, and Patricia Neal, were not going to get exposed. And as it happened, they were not. But I think that was more luck than anything we did. That's a scary moment, and that's a good example of what producers do. I mean, it's like, that's crisis management. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine if it had gone like wildfire through the entire cast of the film?
Oh, it could have. I mean, nobody had any idea. This was a totally innocent mistake, but my God, did we feel bad.
You could be infamous at this point if that had happened.
I know. So that's why I'm reluctant to tell the story.
I'm glad you did. I remember I had her book, and my father's favorite movie is In Harm's Way, and which is a sentimental favorite of mine too. But she was, of course, John Wayne's love interest in that. And so she autographed it for me to give to him. And then she looked at me and she said, "So do you have a favorite film of mine?" And I blushed, and I looked at her, and I looked her right in the eye. I summoned all my courage, and I said, "HUD." And I said HUD, she just, her face just lit up. And then she looked at me like, you little, like in a way like, "Oh, you're a little devil, aren't you?" I mean, she didn't say it, but I just looked at her, and I was blushing though. In HUD. I mean, she was just fantastic. And I'm glad I got to tell her that. I will treasure that memory the rest of my life.
That's great.
are there some psychological benefits to writing during COVID? I mean, have you found some returns? Let's not even talking about just the business of trying to sell books, but have you found a good mental and emotional return from working during the COVID?
Yes. I mean, I think that it would have been much harder for me if I wasn't so busy on things I cared about. I mean, that's the thing about you writing books, that you really care. Even whether you're working on the business side of it, it's not like you necessarily enjoy the business work, but you care deeply what the outcome is going to be. So you really feel like it's good use of your time to write about things for the books. You know, I've written a lot of articles about various publications that have asked questions about the books, and like your question about strong women, there's an article that you can see on my website about that. And I just find that this is a very good time to sort of dig in and take the time without distraction, which you don't always have when you're going in to see the theater, or you're going out for dinner, or you're going this, that, or the other thing. And you just keep at it. And that's been very rewarding for me.
I want to ask you one quick question. This is another just non sequitur. What Ross McDonald would you recommend to people getting started who haven't read any?
Well, I think the best book is The Chill. And I got The Instant Enemy. That's the one I worked with, because The Chill had already been optioned by somebody. And of course, The Chill was never made. The Chill, though, is an extraordinary book. It's very complicated, but very surprising. And it's Ross McDonald at his best. And if you read The Chill, you'll want to read every single book.
Yeah, absolutely right. You know, I confess I haven't read that one in going on 30 years now, but I'm going to pick it back up. You know, lately I've been on a Thin Man jag. The movies, actually. I've read the books, but I have. I'm a sucker for Myrna Loy. Is it odd that my first crush was Myrna Loy? I'm in my 50s. Totally in love with her. In fact, I mean, I can just remember the first time I was probably just 10 or 11 watching. My goodness, I think a Fu Manchu film she was in, where she played the daughter of the villain, and she's gorgeous, and she just has this power. Well, Bert, the trilogy is the Corey Logan thriller trilogy, and it's available everywhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, but the best thing is to go to my website, and that will give you a lot of different choices of where you can get it. And there's also audiobooks on all of the trilogy books. And they're very good. We have a wonderful narrator, Marnie Young, who's audio sorceress, has done all actually 5 of the books. She's done the audio books, and I couldn't be more delighted. And you know, I'm not a big audio book person. You know, I never even learned about it until I was working on my own book. And when you get somebody who really understands the books and they add, you know, certain character to it, it really adds value. She's really improved some of the experience for people who love to listen rather than read. So,
well, you find your readers where they are, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
But anyhow, you go to the website, which is Burt Weissbourd, BurtWeissbourd.com, www.burtweissbourd.com. And there is a page on where you can order each of the books and, you know, the different choices which are available.
Well, there'll be links in the show notes to that. And also I'll eagerly anticipate your holiday shop link coming up, right? We're going to get that in there. And don't forget, folks, to go back and listen to our first interview with Bert. This is great. These are like bookends now, Bert.
This is great. Thank you so much.
Well, you're so welcome. Thank you. It's really been an honor and just a thrill to talk to you. And, you know, of course, the door is always open here at Mysterious Goings On for you.
Okay, that's good to know. Maybe we'll come back for In Velvet, which is the Yellowstone book.
Well, you know what? If you don't at this point, I'll be hurt.
Okay. It's a date.
Thanks so much for listening to Mysterious Goings On. Don't forget, we have a complete archive of all of our interviews, monologues, updates, live readings, dead readings. All of that stuff is available at mgopod.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the usual suspects. Please join us there. Again, don't forget, mgopod.com also has links where to find me on social media and how to get in touch in case you want to be a guest here on the show. Well, I think it's time that I move on for this week, but until next time, keep reading.